In 1988, a student from Cornell wrote a computer program that would change the world. His father was a co-author of Unix, a famous operating system, and Unix had several well-known vulnerabilities, namely holes in finger, sendmail, and RSH. This program exploited these vulnerabilities and aimed to demonstrate the inadequacies of security measures on computer networks. This program copied itself from a host to other computers, and in thus replicating itself, managed to invade a reported 10% of all the computers on the internet. It also replicated itself locally to avoid being killed off. It was this replication that turned what could be a potentially harmless intellectual exercise into a rapidly spreading computer disease. That student from Cornell was Robert Morris, and the program became known as the Morris worm, the first computer worm. Robert Morris was also the first person to be tried and convicted under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation, $400,000 of 400 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. Morris worm was the first computer worm of its kind, and the computer threats have definitely grown significantly more sophisticated since then. Perhaps some of you have heard about Stuxnet, a computer worm discovered in 2010 that targets Siemens SCADA systems and programmable logic controllers. This is what the systems look like. The systems control specific industrial and infrastructure processes, like those in water treatment plants, oil and gas pipelines, and, incidentally, in uranium enrichment plants in Iran. Unlike most malware, Stuxnet is very specific. It targets only computers that have specific configuration. Moreover, it is highly targeted and highly sophisticated, and it makes itself inert if it doesn't find Siemens software on the computers that it infects. What is even more interesting, 60% of the infected computers are located in Iran. And incidentally, it turns out that Stuxnet seems to target centrifuge machines used in uranium enrichment plants in Iran. Both Russian computer security firm Kaspersky Lab and its Finnish counterpart F-Secure have concluded that such a highly sophisticated and highly targeted attack with the goal of damaging the Iranian nuclear program could only be conducted with nation-state support. It has been further speculated that Israel and the United States are involved. We have seen incredible growth in the internet, from thousands of computers at the time of the Morris worm to billions of connected devices today. The internet demographics and the goals of the malicious attackers have also changed drastically in the last years. In the 90s, the internet attacker was a hobbyist types. There were people like Robert Morris who wanted to prove a point, to expose a particular vulnerability, and who believed that information should be free and available for all. Most of the time, their exploits did not carry a malicious payload and were meant only to prove a point or to highlight a security flaw. In the 2000s, we saw the advent of the economic criminal. A lot of them came from Brazil, Russia, China, Eastern Europe, countries that had highly educated populations but were in disadvantaged economic positions. The first virus that was discovered and that was discovered to make money was discovered in 2003. It was called Fizzer. It contained several vulnerabilities, namely a built-in RC backdoor, a denial of service attack tool, data collecting Trojan, as well as some other malicious components. And it also contained the functionality that allowed it to disable certain antivirus programs. Fizzer sent spam from infected computers and thus made money for its creators. Since then, worms and Trojans programs that invade hosts and allow remote attackers control over them, have integrated millions of computers worldwide into botnets. Vint Cerf, considered one of the fathers of the modern internet, has said that botnets are very similar to a pandemic. He has also concluded that up to a quarter of all the connected computers on the internet could be counted as a part of these botnets. However, in the 2010s, we're seeing a new trend, as illustrated by Stuxnet. After the economic criminals of the 2000s and the hobbyists of the 90s, in the 2010s, we're seeing the highly sophisticated and ideologically motivated attackers. What is happening is the internet is seeing the same development cycle as other weapons, from a toy to an economic device to an instrument used by governments, large corporations, and potentially terrorists to further their religious, ideological, and political goals. This is what the sci-fi writers have warned us about, and what we could call weaponized computing. There are 4 key trends that underlie the future of weaponized computing. One is proliferation of computing devices, including mobile and embedded. More devices means more places to attack from and more places to attack. Proliferation of instrumentation. Instrumentation refers to devices that use sensors to measure and control the world around them. By attacking devices that control nuclear plants, Stuxnet became dramatically more destructive. Cloud computing. Financial institutions centralize money, and cloud computing will centralize data. Rather than store our data behind private firewalls, akin to hiding our money under our mattresses, we will centralize it by storing it in these repositories. Unfortunately, these data stores are prime for an attack. They're rich targets. And a consequence of a security breach can be significantly more extensive. And finally, state and ideologically driven attacks. States have way more money to spend on weapons than do individuals. The goal is no longer to prove a point or to make some money, but to create complete destruction or disabling of large computing infrastructure. Robert Morris was a kid who wanted to prove a point. Unfortunately, future computing weapons will be to the Morris swarm what F-16s are to handguns. Hopefully, we will have enough foresight to develop policies, technologies, and moral frameworks to control these weapons so that we don't have to choose between good and evil. Thank you.